Right. So there's been a number of different challenges that we've had here, Yasmin, to this particular case. And Comey had argued against the indictment on several different fronts, saying that it was selective and vindictive. And then he was arguing against the indictment because he said the appointment of Lindsay Halligan, who at one point was counsel to current President Donald Trump when he was going through his legal troubles prior to the election, saying that that appointment was not valid, and arguing that before the court. And so this is just one of several challenges. And on this front, we now have a ruling from Judge Cameron Curry, a senior U.S. district judge, saying the appointment of Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney violated the law and the appointments clause of the Constitution. All actions flowing from Ms. Halligan's defective appointment, including securing and signing Mr. Comey's indictment, were unlawful exercises of executive power and are hereby set aside. The judge went on to say that the Attorney General's attempts to ratify Ms. Halligan's actions were ineffective, and those are also set aside. And so the motion to dismiss the indictment is granted in accordance with the order, and the indictment is dismissed without prejudice. That means technically that the Justice Department can try to bring these charges again when a U.S. attorney is properly installed in the Eastern District of Virginia, where they sought to bring this case. Bit of an asterisk on that, though, because this case was kind of rushed to completion before the grand jury because of statute of limitations concerns. And so now the question is, has that time run? Was there some sort of an agreement here where the Justice Department says, well, wait a minute, we had an opportunity to respond to this. There were challenges, and so we should be able to get that time back to bring an indictment. That's a step that we're just not clear on at the moment. On top of that, another indictment that obviously got a lot of attention against New York's Attorney General Letitia James. That indictment also dismissed on the same grounds and the same type of arguments that Lindsay Halligan was not appropriately appointed to U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. That case is a little bit different because of some of the conduct that's been alleged there. That case, it is possible, could be brought again with a properly installed U.S. Attorney. You're looking at Lindsay Halligan, a photograph of her there. The Comey case, there's still some other challenges that remain outstanding, including on that selective and vindictive prosecution. So we expect to hear from that as soon as this week from the judge in that case to be able to look at that, or the judge rather that's reviewing that issue, to look at that and then be able to make a ruling on that. So as far as Comey's concerned, not all of the orders are in. This one appears to be quite clear and is final as far as this particular indictment, which is the idea of these particular charges and this particular conduct now dismissed without prejudice, and still a bit of an open question, as I mentioned, as to whether or not they can be brought again. If the statute of limitations time has come up, Yasmin, that means that's it as far as that conduct. And if the Justice Department is going to try to bring charges against Comey, who was fired during the first Trump administration, obviously somebody the President of the United States views as a foe, well, they're going to have to go about it a different route.
Hey, Tom, just so I'm clear on this. So my understanding is, in fact, as you mentioned, they may not be able to bring up these specific charges once again for James Comey because of that statute of limitations. But when it comes to the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, in fact, that statute of limitations does not necessarily exist. So these particular charges could be brought up once again.
That's what without prejudice means. It means that you have an opportunity to bring those charges again. And so that's something that we'll have to look at. But at least my initial look at the ruling here is that for the New York Attorney General, she's not quite out of the woods yet as far as future indictment. Whatever other legal challenges she faces, those can also be heard by the court as well. So it's not totally settled for her. For James Comey, obviously, there's going to be some more watching of the dockets and also to see what the Justice Department does in terms of those statute of limitations.
Tom Winter, if you will, stand by for me. I want to bring in senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake as well, who's standing by for us at the White House. Garrett, the president has been pretty outspoken as to wanting the Justice Department to go after his quote-unquote perceived enemies, former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Tish James being two of them. Now that these indictments have in fact been dismissed, Lindsay Halligan being the former special assistant to the president, what are we hearing from the White House?
Nothing yet from the White House on the dismissal of these indictments or from the president himself, who I think will probably comment before the White House press office does, given how personal these investigations and indictments were to him. Yasmin, it's not just that Lindsay Halligan, the attorney here, had worked for the president before he became president again and in his White House, but she was handpicked for this role. Folks might remember that it was on a social media post that the president wrote seemingly directly to his attorney general, Pam Bondi, in which he said that Lindsay Halligan was the person who should take on this role. Bondi, the attorney general, then moved quickly, although perhaps too quickly it seems now, to fill this U.S. attorney's post in Virginia with Ms. Halligan to proceed with these cases. I think it's possible, Yasmin, this will also continue to fuel frustration within the White House towards the DOJ, which has been kind of at the front line in a negative sense on so many news stories related to this administration in recent days, from their handling of the Epstein files now to seeing these indictments dismissed. It's the kind of thing that's going to frustrate the president and the people around him if past is prologue.
Garrett Haake, stand by for me as well. Want to bring in NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Gary, you were inside the courtroom for these repeated hearings, especially last week as well, in which the judge was weighing as to whether or not to dismiss these indictments. What has stood out to you in these proceedings?
Well, there's been so many issues related to the grand jury proceedings in James Comey's case. And I think what happens here is a sort of result of all of those issues combined. You had one where the grand jury observer there was not correctly giving the indictment that the grand jury, the 12-person grand jury, had actually seen to the judge. So Lindsay Halligan perhaps signed an indictment that the entire grand jury didn't actually see. And then you have issues of perhaps missing minutes in a transcript that was brought up by Judge Curry in one of these cases. So perhaps the court reporter may not have been in the room where this all happened. So it was several different issues here. But this all comes back to the 120-day interim U.S. attorney rule. And that's the specific reason why this judge here today is finding that Lindsay Halligan's appointment as U.S. attorney is invalid, because she says you cannot appoint successive U.S. attorneys one after another if they are interim. They have to be appointed and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And that is an important part here. She says, quote, "I conclude that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as an interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, and that she's been unlawfully serving in that role since September 22nd. Now, that's an important date, because James Comey was indicted several days after September 22nd, which is why she is finding his indictment to be invalid and throwing that out. And she's doing the same thing with Letitia James's case.
Gary, quickly take us back to last week, the moment in which it was revealed that, in fact, Lindsay Halligan did not get the entire grand jury to sign off on that James Comey indictment. What was the reaction inside that courtroom?
It was a remarkable scene there, because this happens all the time, all over the country. A U.S. attorney signs an indictment, she gives it to the judge, and then the judge affirms it there after a grand jury brings down that indictment. That is not what happened here. What happened here is that there was two different copies. One had 3 counts and one had 2 counts, because the grand jury did not indict on one of the 3 counts. So the grand jury coordinator just edited the document, took off one of the 3 counts, and then put the document towards Lindsay Halligan. She signed it, and it went right to a judge. The grand jury never saw that second indictment, and that is a significant issue. That's what Tom was talking about as one of the other issues in this case. There's several different motions that, frankly, don't matter as much anymore because of this decision here. Of course, this could all get appealed.
Gary Grumbach, stand by for me as well. Want to bring our Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell, who's joining us by phone. Kelly, before I get to you, I want to read the statement that we're getting in from New York Attorney General Letitia James, in which she says, "I am heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from around the country." She goes on, "I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue fighting for New Yorkers every single day." Help put this moment in context for us, Kelly.
Good to be with you, Yasmin. This is really a huge setback for the president and his view of how he can push the Department of Justice to go after his perceived political enemies. Letitia James, the Attorney General, a Democrat in New York, has been someone who has drawn the ire of the president for a long time. She won a significant judgment against him and his family business in New York. James Comey has been an outspoken critic of the president since he left the job as FBI director. He was fired by Donald Trump. This is about President Trump using his power in ways that a court has now said exceeded his authority. As we heard the details from our colleagues about the 120-day rule, this means a personally selected attorney who had been an insurance attorney and a staffer in the White House, never a prosecutor, was installed in this position because the president wanted her to be there. The court finds that they did not follow the law in how that was done, and then everything that comes from it is now tossed aside. Now, as we have been discussing, it is possible because of the way this was dismissed that charges could be brought again, but that takes us back to why was Lindsay Halligan installed in the first place? Because career prosecutors who had reviewed this material in both cases, did James Comey lie to Congress? Did he obstruct their process? Did Letitia James seek favor in her mortgage rate that was a financial benefit to her? Other prosecutors reviewed that and did not seek those charges. So it's a real question about can these cases go forward, but the big picture in this moment is that the president and his approach to using the powers of his office has been rebuked by a judge, and that is a significant factor. These are two public rivals of the president who are now scoring at least a temporary win, and the president will certainly respond to this. But this is a significant rebuke of how President Trump views his use of the Department of Justice, how Attorney General Bondi conducted herself by appointing Lindsay Halligan. So these are big, far-reaching themes in the use of executive power in the Trump White House. And that applies to many other topics in many other areas. Today we're talking about 2 indictments, but it is significant.
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you for jumping on that for us. We appreciate you. That concludes this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more ahead on your local NBC station, on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Thanks for watching.